folks, and welcome to Dresden.Church Online. So this past Sunday, I read from 2 Timothy chapter 2 in the middle of our message, and I shared that in real time. While I was standing on the platform, God was convicting me with this scripture. And since Sunday morning, I've had a bunch of feedback. Folks have sent me text messages, a couple emails, even received a phone call. And it was really the same message. People were saying, hey, you're not alone. This is something I'm struggling with as well. And 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 24 through 26 says this: a servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but be kind to everyone. Be able to teach, and here's the part that got me, be patient with difficult people. Gently instruct those who oppose the truth. Perhaps God will change those people's hearts, and then they will learn the truth. Then they will come to their senses and escape from the enemy's trap, for they have been held captive by him to do whatever he wants. And that really resonated with people. And I even got a text message this morning talking about how they were taking concrete steps to put the phone aside and to invest in those people that they even found difficult. And if you've spent any time here at Dresden or heard me speak at all, you'll know that I'm constantly going back to Jesus's commands, right? The commands that he says fulfill all of the law and the prophets. And that's the command to simply love God and love people. You know, God calls us to love your neighbor as yourself. But what do you do about those people in your life that are just so hard to love? You know, everyone has difficult people in their lives that make obedience to Jesus' command like a real legit struggle. You know, whether it's someone who is rude to you, whether it's someone who has rejected you, someone who lies or gossips about you, or even just a person that for whatever reason you find extremely irritating to be around. God actually, I believe, wants to use these people in your life to help you grow. And this morning I was reading through some of the events in King David's life in the Old Testament, and I think we find some examples of God doing this very thing in the life of King David. And so I want to just take a few moments to share with you 4 ways that I think God used some difficult people in David's life to help him grow and mature before he ever became king of Israel. And the first one can be found in 1 Samuel chapter 16. So Samuel, the prophet, is sent to David's dad's house, a guy named Jesse. And Jesse is living in Bethlehem. And Samuel is sent to Jesse's house to anoint one of his sons to be the next king of Israel. And so when Samuel arrives and consults God about who's to be appointed, he discovers that none of Jesse's 7 sons that he had brought to him is the one that God had chosen. In fact, we read in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verses 11 through 12, it says this: so Samuel asked Jesse, are these all the sons you have? They're still the youngest, Jesse answered. He's out tending sheep. Samuel said, send for him. Will he not sit down? We will not sit down until he arrives. I can't read today. So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. Right? So think about it. God had called David to be the future king, right? That was God's decision. But David's own father didn't even consider him a viable option. Now, Jesse's exact reasoning for leaving David out, it's not spelled out in the story. It could have been because he was young, right? Like the very last in order to inherit his own estate. Or perhaps maybe he was so good at tending those sheep that his dad didn't want to lose his help. Or it's possible that his dad didn't think he was good enough to be king. But whatever the reasoning, David's dad still rejected him to even be considered. You know, if anyone should have your back and believe in you, it should be your own parents. But David's dad didn't invite him to the party. I mean, talk about being overlooked and left out. I imagine his dad was one of those difficult people. But God didn't overlook David. God made sure his plan was carried out because nothing could stop the plan of God for David's life. And so in this, David learned that no human being was going to change his destiny. That was only between him and God. And he learned to trust God's leading and direction in life in spite of those around him. And so the lesson for us is that when someone in your life, whether it's your parents, your boss, that difficult person, anyone else, when they seem to overlook you, intentionally leave you out, lean into God. Only God has the ultimate authority in your life. I think far too often we give too much authority to the opinions and to the interactions that we have with other people. But if we lean into God and God's authority in our life, God will grow your faith in Him and carry out the calling that He has on your life. Well, in the next chapter of 1 Samuel, after David was anointed a future king, we see him going back and forth between tending his father's sheep and ministering to King Saul through his gift of music. And one day, while David is at his father's house, his father told him to go take some food to his oldest three brothers who were out fighting a war with the Philistines under King Saul. And so David brought his brothers food as he was told, but when he got to the battlefield, he was shocked at the sight of this giant Philistine who was mocking the Israelites and even mocking God. And so David was inspired to do something about this blasphemous giant. And so he asked some of the Israelites, hey, what's the reward if I kill him? And so hearing him ask this, David's oldest brother unleashed on David. In 1 Samuel 17, verses 28 through 29, it says, when Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Now what have I done? Said David. Can't I even speak? So David's brother falsely accused him of being selfish and evil. I mean, have you ever had somebody falsely accuse you of doing something? I'm sure you have. I mean, it could be that his brother was mad and jealous about being passed over for king, or perhaps he was just worn out from battle. But either way, David didn't deserve it. And David's quick response to his brother suggests that this incident wasn't the first time this had happened. His quick dismissal of the comment shows that David had learned to take comments like these in stride. David learned to trust God's truth and not get distracted by the insulting words from those around him. And for us, if you face people in your life who falsely accuse you, try to slander your name, commit to staying focused on what God says about you. Remind yourself that the truth will always win out. And when you choose to do this, it will strengthen your ability to continue to focus on God over your circumstances. Now, David couldn't take the blaspheming of God from this Philistine giant. We know him as Goliath. He couldn't take it any longer. So he was ready to stand up to him, but based on his physical stature, he had no business entering into a fight with this huge, experienced warrior as this young, untrained boy in battle. And we read this in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 33, where King Saul says this, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But we've seen how David has grown in his ability to trust in God over his circumstances. And he does this once again by choosing to fight this difficult person who's been cursing his God. And it's only by God's intervention that David defeats Goliath. And as a result, God got the glory, and David's faith in God to do the impossible grew stronger. And 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 47 says, all those who gathered here will know that it's not by the sword or the spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. So when you choose to do something that seems impossible in your own strength, like forgiving somebody who's hurt you, or being kind to someone who isn't kind to you, your faith in God and his ability to work in you will grow stronger. It will prepare you for bigger challenges down the road. And finally, there was perhaps no more difficult person in his life than Saul. Like on multiple occasions for several years, Saul tried to kill David because he was jealous of his success. And God's hand was on David and no longer on Saul, and that made Saul extremely angry and irrational, with David getting the brunt of that anger. Now, instead of trying to get revenge or retaliating against Saul, David continued to honor Saul as king, and God kept blessing and growing him. Saul hurled spears multiple times at David while he was ministering to him. David escaped and continued to come back and show Saul love and actually served him. And so these decisions in dealing with a difficult Saul, it grew David's character and servant's heart. Saul sent David into battle multiple times with hopes that David would get killed by an enemy, but the experience only made David stronger. Saul's death wish for David caused David to go into hiding, but during this desolate season, it strengthened David's commitment to God. You know, while hiding, many outcasts joined David, men who were in trouble, men who were in debt, many who were just discontent. And as this group gathered for guidance, David grew in his leadership ability. And through all of these struggles that David faced as a result of Saul, David became more prepared to be the kind of God-honoring king that Israel needed. And did David do his job as king perfectly? Not at all. But he continued to rely on God. So while you may not have people in your life today that are trying to kill you like David did, you can still grow and get better through the struggles that difficult people in your life cause. You too can grow in character and strength in your relationship with God and in your leadership like David did when you continue to press on and obey God in the midst of being treated unjustly. Right? Difficult people in your life cannot be avoided, but God will use them for your good if you submit to his teaching and you choose to take the high road, that you choose to still love God and love people. Sometimes you need to set boundaries with those people, right? Those people who are being abusive. I mean, after all, David didn't stay and allow Saul to kill him. But if in those situations, you can still choose forgiveness and a soft heart, you'll open yourself up to the good that God wants to do in you as a result of that difficult person in your life. And maybe, just maybe, we can actually love God and even love those difficult people. And we've got to do it together. Well, speaking of doing things together, I want to encourage you to join us this Sunday at 10 a.m. as we wrap up our series that we've called Good Medicine, where we're going to talk about how life lived together is a whole lot better than a life lived alone. Well, thank you all so much, and I hope to see you Sunday.